This show contains movie spoilers and swearing. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Bitesize Cinema. I'm your host RJ McCready, and for this episode I'm going to be taking you back to the year in 2006 to look at Leonardo DiCaprio's action-adventure political drama Blood Diamond. So let's play you a trailer and I'll see you soon.
It came from the heart of the earth. A stone so rare, men will do anything to possess it. And all who touch it are left with blood on their hands.
That diamond is my ticket out of this god-forsaken continent.
So what are you? Smuggler?
You're a journalist. Some tell me you're here to make a difference, huh?
And you're here to make a buck?
You know, in America it's bling bling, but out here it's bling bang. Where did you bury it? The only reason you're still alive is because you haven't told anyone where it is.
You will find it for me.
My son! Where is my son?
What if I helped you find your family? That makes us partners!
I am...
Chance he has of getting his son back.
What if I wanted to go with you?
Hold on! I don't give a damn who's down there. Kill them all!
Give it to me.
Get him where it is! Get him! My family, my home, I don't lost everything! I will find you. If it takes my life.
And welcome back. So the synopsis of this film is a fisherman, a smuggler and a syndicate of businessmen wit over the possession of a priceless diamond. It's got a 2 hour and 23 minute runtime. It's got 8.1 on IMDb. It's rated a 15. And it was directed by Edward Zwick. He's made other movies such as The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, Glory with Matthew Broderick, and Defiance with Daniel Craig. So there is a pattern with his style of movie making. When you look at his other films, they are grounded. They're action adventure movies, but they've also got like a political statement in there as well, and this ties in with this movie that we're talking about today. So the director is very clever at doing that. That's kind of like his signature in directing and filmmaking. The film was backed by Warner Brothers for $100 million, and it had a healthy return back in 2006 with a good box office of $171 million, so it did quite well. Got music by James Newton Howard, an incredible score to this movie. James Newton Howard's also done films for the Nolan Batman movies, King Kong and Waterworld, which I've spoken about before on the show. And the cast for this movie is fantastic. You've got Leonardo DiCaprio, who plays Danny Archer, Jermaine Newson as Solomon Vandy, Jennifer Connelly as Maddie Bowen, and Arnold Vosloo as Colonel Cortez. So it's just to name some of the actors in this film. So yeah, that's the building block. But let's get into this. I mean, I went to go and watch this back in 2006. And I went in with low expectations for some reason. I don't know what I was expecting. I wasn't a massive fan of Leonardo DiCaprio at the time. I saw him in Titanic. He was okay in that, but at the time I just thought he might have just been possibly just this sort of one hit wonder type guy. I don't know why. It's just what went through my mind until I watched this film, and I remember coming out of the cinema and thinking, wow, that was a really good movie, and that was a really good performance from DiCaprio. I think the film, as much as I've said it's got a political message in it about the blood diamonds, which I think works really well and it really does open your eyes up. I think it's one of my favourite DiCaprio performances. He gets a little bit, let's just say, mixed reviews on his South African accent. I've just spoken to people when I talk about this film, but people either say it's good or yeah, it's okay, or they say, oh yeah, I couldn't get used to his accent. I personally think that he pulled it off really well. As soon as I watched it, I thought, oh wow, this is DiCaprio. He's putting on a really good performance in the movie. I picked up on that straight away when I watched it at the cinema. Even to the point where I came on and I thought, if DiCaprio continued talking like this in other movies, I was like sold with that. So it was almost like I was sold with him being a South African. And then on top of his performance, you got another incredible performance by Jermaine Houston, who plays Solomon Vandy in this movie, and I remember him from Gladiator, so he was doing really well, and he has done really well. You see him in the Guardians of the Galaxy of recent. Jennifer Connelly, yes, she's some 80s royalty as well, from a film that I love from the 80s, and I know a lot of other people do. You remember her from a film called Labyrinth, where she plays the protagonist in that movie, trying to get through the maze of David Bowie. Again, great performance. I can't sort of rate the performances in this movie enough. And also Arnold Vosloo, who plays Colonel Cortez from, I remember him from The Mummy from 1999. So yeah, it's just, for me, going into the film, not really expecting too much, to coming out and saying this is a really good film. And as I mentioned, it's got that a political message about the blood diamonds. Let me talk about that very quickly. I never realised that there were conflict diamonds back at that time. That was just, and I think that was the thing with this movie. It opened up a lot of people's minds to that, and I came away thinking, wow, is that what's happening? And I'd be honest with you, I've never really looked at diamonds again in the same way. So I think the film worked in that way, and I think there were campaigns, and this movie certainly sent that message out, and I think it did tarnish the trade, and quite rightly so. Whilst I'm on the subject of that, let's just talk about the premise of this movie. So it is based in the time of the Sierra Leone Civil War in 1991. So the country was torn between the government and the loyalist and an insurgent force, which you had the government fighting a rebel insurgent called the RUF, the Revolutionary United Front, which was a real insurgence, and this was a real war that went on for 11 years, and I think it finished in 2002, so it went on for a long time. It also touches on the Danny Archer character being him being an ex-soldier that fought in a war back in the 60s into the 70s, which was the Rhodesian Bush War, and he's part of 32 Battalion. And what's interesting here when I watched this is that I actually worked with a guy back in the day when I used to work in a boatyard on the south coast of England, and the guy that I worked with was South African. He actually told me about this war back in when I worked with him in the early 90s, and when he told me that he was a soldier or an ex-soldier, I went, oh okay, did you I just thought, oh, did you fight in the Falklands, or was you in the Gulf War? And he said, no, I was actually in the Rhodesian Civil War. And I was like, wow, what was that? And he said, exactly, yeah, it's a war that not many people know about. So I was kind of familiar with the Danny Archer character in this movie, and the interesting thing with this was I was in my teens, so I was in awe of the stories that he was telling me, but he was saying at the same time, and it was something that I picked up on with the Archer character in this movie, which I thought just tied it into someone who I knew was in this conflict. Was my friend had carried the same sort of facial expressions where I was interested, and he was basically saying, well. And it was actually something that I'll never forget what he said to me. And he said, just remember one thing. He said, fighting a war is nothing to be proud of, and pray that you never have to. And from a teenage age, I was like, it hit me, and I came away and I thought, wow, I could see the emotions in his face. So then watching this film, I just remembered the guy that I worked with, and I thought, okay, so this is, a movie that's kind of given me an ounce of the atrocities of war, and I could sort of see what he was then saying. So I think that's the reason why I like this film a little bit more, because I know someone who's involved in it and could relate to it in some ways. But having said that, so you've got the atrocities of war, and it shows that in this film. But then it also, it's very clever to be able to give you a film which has got all the elements of a good movie, where you've got a little bit of a romance between Jennifer Connelly and Danny Archer. They throw in some really good action. They throw in some very sort of, like say, harsh moments of war atrocities, especially with the child soldiers and the chopping off of arms and the rebels. And then on top of all of that, all of the atrocities and the awfulness which is portrayed in this movie, you've then got people trying to make money out of it with the conflict diamonds, who should quite rightly say be named and shamed. So the film really carries that off. It gives you a good action movie, but it also tells you that as well, which makes you come away. So it's a very clever blend of the two, which I think works really well. And the other thing is this film, for me, it's a 2.5 hour movie, but it does run very quick, and I don't feel like I'm watching a 2.5 hour movie, so it runs at a really good pace. So the film itself is it's basically a rescue movie at the core, where you've got the Solomon Vandy character at the beginning with his family in the middle of this conflict, trying to make a life for himself. He's a farmer. He loves his son dear. He's trying to send him to school. He's trying to make a better life for himself. And I think it's some incredible acting by Jermaine Houston. And the way the movie starts, you've got it comes on the screen, Blood Diamond. You've got a beautiful pan shot of the sun setting in the background, and the music by James Newton Howard. It reminded me of Gladiator. It was very spiritual, had a nice African theme to it. So you're introduced to our character. Then they are overthrown by the rebels. Jermaine Houston gets captured. There's as I mentioned already, there's an awful scene where these poor village people, they're getting their arms chopped off by the rebels to stop them from signing. There's also an incredible performance by David Harwood. He's an English actor, and he plays Captain Poison. Does a great job in this as the rebel captain. So then you've got Vandy's son gets taken by the rebels. He gets turned into a child soldier. So now he's aimed to try and get his boy back. And I think that always works very well in a movie when you've got a father or mother or parent trying to get their children back. And I think for me, that works every time, being a parent myself, or even if you're not a parent, it's just trying to get a loved one back. So that works for me in the film. You're then introduced to Danny Archer, who is, when you think about it, he's not a nice bloke. He's not a nice guy. He's working for the Vanderkamp Diamond Corporation. He's out there. He's trying to make a buck for himself. He's the middleman. And they show you how he's smuggling the diamonds, and they're basically washing them through to make them look like they're clean diamonds before they get through to the markets out in other countries. But yeah, he's an interesting character for me because it's a story of his own redemption. I think there's a good man in there, but he's after his own financial game, and I think it's just the environment that he is in. It's, as I mentioned before, when he was in the 3-2 Battalion fighting in the Bush War, he's obviously experienced some atrocities in his life. He knows that if he doesn't raise his game in the environment that he is in, he will be dead. So I think it's a case of him being underneath it. I think there is a good guy there, which you find out throughout the movie, and it's a story of his redemption. So he's an interesting character to me. And then the way his story unfolds to tie in with Solomon Vandy is that a diamond smuggling campaign goes wrong for him. He gets captured, he gets arrested, and he gets thrown into the same jail as Vandy. I forgot to mention that Vandy actually finds a blood diamond in a harvest camp, and it gets overrun by the government troops and he gets captured. So that's what brings these two together, and he finds out through Vandy that he has a diamond. So Archer gets released, and now it becomes a movie of basically, if you help me, I will help you. So they get released from prison, and now Archer is trying to form this uneasy alliance. Along the way, he arms himself with a weapon, and he goes to a bar in Freetown, and this is where he meets Jennifer Connelly, who's a journalist, and she picks up on him, and she indicates that he is possibly a smuggler, and she tries to get this story out of him, so that ties that up. And then Freetown gets overrun, and this is at a time where Archer is talking to Vandy, and he says, look, you know, you want me to help you find your son, you're going to help me find this diamond. At the same time, it's a great action scene. You've got the RUF invading Freetown, you've got the government troops fighting back, you've got our two main characters now running through the town, they're trying to get away, and it's a great action set piece. You've got explosions, and it did remind me of a set piece right out of Black Hawk Down, with all the actions and the explosions and the fighting. So they managed to get out of Freetown, and now they're on a journey to find Solomon's family. So this is part of the deal. So Archer's basically saying, if I get you your family, then will you tell me where the diamond is? So they get to the refugee camp, and they do find his family, but then his son Deer is missing because he's been turned into a child soldier. And this is where they meet Jennifer Connelly again, and you get a good conversation between Archer and Connelly now, where he's basically saying, look, yeah, I am what I am. I want to try and find this diamond, but you need to try and help this guy find his family. It's interesting what Connelly says here. She goes, well, why should I help one person out? And she kind of contradicts herself to what she said earlier, and she goes, oh, I can't believe I just said that. So you get some really good tie-ins here with the characters. It's got this, like, Jennifer Connelly is trying to get a story. Danny Archer is in it for himself, because I actually thought at this point he was actually doing a good thing by him trying to find his family, but he's not. He's for his own gain to try and find this diamond. But Dio's missing. Solomon Vandy's son has been captured, so now it becomes a rescue movie to try and find his son, because Vandy said, look, unless I get him, I'm not going to tell you where this diamond is. And the other thing I forgot to mention here is that Archer has also struck a deal with his old colonel from the Bush Wars, and this is Colonel Cortez, who has now set up his own private army. He actually got him released from prison with a deal for the diamond, and he now knows that in order to try and get this diamond, he's going to need his help. So they need to go to Kono. And the way they do this is that they pretend to be journalists, so they jump on a bus. There's a little bit of humour here where he says, you know, I'm the cameraman, so they chuck a little bit of humour into the movie with everything else. And along the way they get attacked by the RUF again, the bus blows up, they have to carry on foot. They then come across a friendly militiaman. They come across a character called Ben Capenay, and he is trying to help out the local villagers. He's trying to sort of keep people away from this conflict. He's a kind man. And then you get a little bit of downtime in the movie here between Archer and Connelly. There's a little bit of character building here where Archer basically tells her about him being a soldier in the past and how it has kind of messed him up a little bit. And then Jennifer Connelly talks about her father, but there's just a little bit of Archer saying, you Americans like to show your emotions, and he's basically saying, I'm not a man that wants to show that emotion. So there's a little bit of character building there between the two, but at the same time there is a little bit of a romance between them. But what's clever with this movie is they indicate a romance, and it does work, but it never gets to them taking each other's clothes off and, sleeping with each other. It doesn't go down that route, and I think that's very clever how it does that. It just indicates a romance, and it just works very well for the movie. So they managed to get to Kone. They see Colonel Cortez, and again you get another bit of character building here between Cortez and Archer, where Cortez comes out and says something to Archer. He says to him that you will never leave Africa. Africa is in your blood. And he picks up the soil and he says, you know why the soil's red, Danny? It's because of all the conflicts we've had in our country, all the blood that's been spilt. So there's a little bit of a spiritual thing there as well. So, as I said at the beginning of the episode, this story is about the redemption of Archer. And as he goes along, he is actually being stripped of all his selfishness, and without him really wanting to do it, he's actually put on the path of becoming a good person, which kind of unfolds a little bit later on. So Archer makes an agreement with Cortez. It's like a 60-40. They're sort of balancing out a deal here between each other, and then Archer goes with Vandy on foot to find the camp from the beginning where Vandy buried the diamond. But you get a part in here between Archer and Jennifer Connelly. She doesn't really want him to go, but he says that you get on that plane, and she says to him, it's a nice conversation between the two. She says, my sisters have married good men, but I've pretty much always chosen the adventurer types, and she's basically saying, in a way, that she is falling for this guy. And she says that, call me when you get there, and he basically says to her, I will, as soon as I get to a telephone. So now you've got this scene where Vandy and Archer, they go into the jungle, they try and find the camp. There's some good moments between them. There's some comic moments here where Solomon is asking Archer all these questions, and he comes out, you sure not a journalist or something like that? So it's a little bit of comic between them. But then there's a little bit of a moment where Vandy puts their lives into danger when he shouts out at a RUF convoy, thinking that his son's on board, and they have to run away. And this is where Archer says to him, he says, if you do that again, I'm going to kill you. And he actually pulls out a gun and puts it to his head. And what's interesting with this moment here is that for someone, Vandy actually comes out and says something that Archer said at the beginning, which I forgot to say. He says something along the way where I'm already dead, I already know my fate. So that's what Archer comes out and says. But then at this moment when he's pointing the gun at Vandy, saying, you do that again or I'll kill you, Vandy basically comes, well, just do it, just shoot me because I'm already dead. And it's a very clever moment between the two, because this is where Archer knows that him and Vandy are pretty much the same person in this. And Archer doesn't say that, but you can see it in his face where he's gone, well, that's what I say. So yeah, again, it's all, this movie is continually giving you character development. So they get to the RUF camp, it's night time. Archer says we'll go in the morning, but then Archer also comes out and says, look, I don't think your son's going to be there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call in Colonel Cortez. He's going to put in an airstrike, so he's going to divert the rebels, whilst we flank in round the back where your diamond's buried, and then we'll go and get it, and then we'll go. But then Vandy says to him, well, that wasn't a deal, you was going to get my son. I think my son's down there. And Archer says, no, your son's not there, we're going to go and get the diamond. So during the night, Vandy sneaks into the camp. He tries to get his son, and now he gets captured by Captain Poison, and he says to him, look, I've dug and dug and dug, and I try to find that diamond. Now you're going to find it for me. And at the same time, it comes the morning. Archer calls in the airstrike. The helicopter turns up, and now you get your third and final action scene, which is great. You get the gunship helicopter that comes down, starts shooting the camp. You've got Vandy, who has a final standoff with Captain Poison, actually kills him with a shovel. And now you've got Archer, and this is where he has that turn of redemption. He now comes in armed with an AK-47. He's running around, he's shooting the bad guys, and now he goes in to go and rescue Deer, which I think is fantastic. He now becomes like the rescuer. You get a great scene now where the helicopter comes in, it's shooting, Archer's trying to run away, and he's got Deer with him. Then after the battle, Colonel Cortez turns up, and he basically says to Vandy, "You're going to tell me where that diamond is?" And now you've got Archer who's caught between the two, and he's saying, look, he says to Vandy, he says, you need to tell him where that diamond is, because otherwise he's going to kill you. And then Archer does something here where he's, at the same time he's trying to save Vandy's life, he says, look, he tells Cortez that's his son, he'll tell you anything because of his son. And then Cortez puts a gun up against Vandy's son head, and he says, you're going to tell me. So they go to the location, and he finds the diamond, and it's just that forever that double cross in this movie. Vandy manages to distract one of Cortez's soldiers, whilst Archer then shoots them, and you get a shootout between Archer and Cortez, and Archer kills him, and this is where he comes out and says a line which he said earlier. He says, "TIA, Danny, this is Africa," and then Danny shoots him dead. But throughout the gunfight, you don't see this straight away, but Archer comes out and says, you better got that diamond, haven't you? And Archer's been shot, and now he's trying to get them away to safety, but Archer's been wounded that bad that he can't make it, and now this is where it's the turn. He now says, look, I'm not going to make it. He says, you take that diamond, you get it to Jennifer Connelly's character, and she will help you get it to the right place. And actually, I forgot to mention this earlier, this is where Archer, before going to the encampment, he actually gave Connelly a book with all the Vanderkamp details, so that would enable her to release a story. So he's done the right thing there, and he helps Vandy get away. There's the RUF soldiers coming in, he's shooting them, and he says, look, you get away. And he gives Vandy a gun. He says, if that pilot tries to double cross you, just shoot him. And now you get a really good scene in. I think this works really well. It's a bit I liked about the film. It's a sad bit because, a spoiler here, but Archer is dying, and he dies in this movie. But I think it's just great how it ends, because ultimately he's found his redemption. He knows he's going to die, and it ties in the bit when he spoke to Colonel Cortez, where he says, it's in your blood, Danny, you'll never leave Africa. And he picks up the red soil, and his blood is going into the soil. And he has a one last telephone call with Connelly, and he basically says, I'm glad I met you, I'm not going to make it, but make sure that Vandy you make sure you get the story out, and you help Vandy, and you help his family out. So it really ties it up, that bit. It's almost like, as I said before with other movie reviews, something that happens at the beginning is something that bookends at the end. You've got Archer that starts off, and then Archer at the end where he's found his redemption. And it almost felt a little bit like Gladiator, spiritual, where, another spot here where Maximus dies and he knows that his fate's sealed. So it kind of felt like the same thing. So then it goes to the end of the movie. It's sort of tying off now, and I forgot to mention you've got not Martin Sheen. You've got Michael Sheen in this, who is Vanderkamp, and he takes the diamond, and Connelly takes photographs of the meetings to try and get the story out. And then the film ends with something that really did happen in 2000, which is the Kimberley process certification scheme, where the country has become familiar with what's happening with the conflict diamonds. So that's how the film ends, with Vandy stood at the conference, and he's obviously going to talk about the conflict diamonds. So yeah, and that's how it ends. So it's a good film. If you haven't seen it, go and check it out. Also, the thing I was going to mention as well, it kind of reminded me a little bit of, it was like more of a political version of Romancing the Stone from the 80s. It's like, you know, the Archer character is a little bit like Jack T. Colton, which is another good movie from the 80s. So there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. As always, I'll do a little bit of admin before I close up the show. So I am a proud member of the Legion Podcast Network, so please go and check out all the other shows on there, including my other show, which is the Mystery Vault Podcast. Just running a little bit late on one of the episodes there, but hopefully I should have a new episode out this week, which is the Finding of Noah's Ark. So I'll be having a look at that. I'll be coming back soon. I've got a couple of guests coming on board. I've got Kung Fu Dave coming on board for the historical epic, which is Braveheart. And then I've got Mark Lockhart joining me for Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. So there'll be a couple of fun episodes in the works. And you can also find Bitesize Cinema on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube and several other places if you put in Bitesize Cinema Podcast into Google. I've got a Facebook page. It's where I'm most active and it's the best place to contact me. So if there's any films that you want me to review, let me know. So yeah, that's it, guys. So as always, keep it bite-size, keep it safe.
If you enjoyed this show, then make sure you check out the other great shows on the Legion Podcast Network, like Cinema Psyops, Cinema Beef, Devour the Podcast, Duncan and Bo Come Correct, Exploding Heads Horror Movie Podcast, Friday the 13th, Get Slayed, The Hellming Power Hour, Hello, This is the Doom Show, Hero Hero Go Show, Kill the Cast, Underwater Kaiju from Outer Space, Jerry Hates Action, Legion After Dark, Mental Health, Obsessive Cinema, Discourse, Pick 6 Movies, the podcast by The Cemetery, the podcast on Haunted Hill, the Psychosemantic Podcast, Rick Radio, House of Wax, Dude Looks Like the 80s, Rabbit and Red Radio, the Shadecast, Short Bus Cinema, 2 Drink Minimum Commentaries, the VD Clinic, Who Will Survive Horror Podcast, and Witch vs. the Doomsday Clock. With such a wide spread of shows, there is guaranteed to be a niche for you to fall in love with. Horror, politics, movies, books, sex, music, commentaries, health, video games, kaiju, action, news, comedy, and opinions that would most likely get you killed in some parts of the world. We are proud to bring you some of the best podcasting in the world. Check us out at www.legionpodcast.com, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and any other dark corner of the internet where podcasts can be found.